Today I'm going to be showing you how easy it is to make these potato burger buns by hand. No stand mixer needed. This is a bread recipe that is slightly sweet, fluffy, and very soft. It is one of those bread recipes that goes well with almost anything. Now first, let's start with the ingredients that you're going to need. The first thing we're going to need is going to be 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/4 cup of white sugar, 2 small potatoes that will cook to make the mashed potato, which you'll need half a cup of it, 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter at room temperature, 2 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast, 2 teaspoons of salt, and a cup of milk at room temperature. You're also gonna need 1 egg to make the egg wash. The first thing we need to do is to prepare the potatoes. Here I'm using russet potatoes because that's what I normally have at home, but you could also use yellow potatoes. First, wash the potatoes to remove any dirt that the skin may have. Then you need to peel the potatoes. You don't have to be perfect, just try to remove the most skin as possible. What I always like to do first is to fill a pot with water and put it right next to me so I could quickly put the potatoes in the water after peeling them to prevent them from browning. Now for this recipe, it's not really necessary for you to do this because we're only peeling 2 potatoes. I'm just so used to it that I always do it. Then we cut the potatoes to about 1-inch thick pieces. Then you want to cook the potatoes for about 12 minutes over high heat. Keep in mind that the smaller you cut the potato, the quicker it will cook. To do this, I don't add any salt to the water, so just cook this in plain water. Once cooked, I always check the potatoes with a fork to make sure that they are tender. If they're still a little bit hard, just give it a couple more minutes until they're tender. Then we just have to drain the potatoes and mash. Here you'll see me using a fork, but this will be 10 times easier if you use the potato masher. I just forgot to use it. You want to mash until there's no more lumps. Now, some people make this with instant mashed potatoes. I myself have never done it, but if you want to give it a try, I say to use, instead of half a cup of fresh mashed potato, to only use 1/4 of the dry potato mix. Now, after you finish mashing the potato, we're going to save half a cup because that's what we need for the recipe. Probably your potato will seem a little dry, but don't be tempted to add any water, milk, or butter. We're just gonna use it as is. Now in a big bowl, we want to add the flour, the sugar, the salt, and the instant yeast. I always like to weight my ingredients because I feel that I could be more accurate. Because sometimes when I get a cup of flour, it could weigh 140 grams, and other times it will weigh 150 grams. And just so you know, each cup of flour I used weighed 150 grams. Then after adding the yeast, I like to add the potato and mix it in a little bit before adding the rest of the ingredients. You see me making this by hand, but if you have a stand mixer, you could use it. We then add the butter, and I also like to mix it in a little bit as well before I add any of the liquid. If you use a stand mixer, you don't have to do what I did, which was adding the ingredients little by little just to make sure that I mix them in well. You can just throw everything in the bowl and mix it all together at the same time. Then I add the room temperature milk. If your milk is still a little bit cold, just simply pop it in the microwave for 30 seconds and you're good. Then we're going to mix everything together. I always like to start mixing the dough with a fork or a spatula. Since the mixture is very wet, if I use my hands, the dough will simply stick all over my hands. Then most of the flour is incorporated, I start using my hands. What we're trying to do here is to mix until we form some kind of ball, and then we can transfer this to our table. Then I start to knead the dough. As you see here, my dough wasn't too sticky, so I didn't have to add any flour to my surface. But if for some reason after kneading your dough for at least 2 minutes it is still very sticky, just add a pinch of flour to your table. Now you need to knead the dough for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes have passed, your dough should look a little smoother. Then we want to form a ball with the dough. Then we're going to take a big bowl and add about 1 teaspoon of oil. The dough needs to rise for an hour. If it's a hot summer day, it is very possible that your dough can rise very fast because of the heat and the humidity. But in a much colder and dry day, the dough can take a little longer. That's why what I like to do is just turn on my oven light and let the dough rise in the oven. Make sure that you cover your bowl with plastic film before putting it to rise. Then we need to prepare our baking tray. Line your tray with parchment paper. The tray I'm using here is a 10.5 by 15.5, but you could use whatever tray you have. Just remember that the smaller the tray, that can affect how much and how your buns grow. Then you want to flour your table so the dough won't stick to it while we work with it. I always like to punch the air of the dough before putting it in my surface. You want to knead it for about 30 seconds and then kind of make a log with it. Then we need to divide the dough. I divided the dough into 10 equal pieces, and for this I used the food scale, but you don't need to use one. You could just eyeball the size. The good thing about this recipe is that it could be divided into whatever size you like. In my case, I divided it into 10, so I made burger buns that were in the typical supermarket size ones. But this could be divided into 8 pieces, and those buns will be really big buns. But you could also divide this into 16 or 20 small balls, and you can make slider buns. Good for sandwiches or just as dinner rolls for Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. After dividing the dough, I like to flatten each piece, and then I tuck in the sides until I kind of make a ball. Then I roll the ball against my counter until the ball is formed and the bottom gets sealed. You're going to repeat this with all the pieces until you formed all the balls. Now we need to place each ball on the tray so they can rise. Place each ball about 1 to 1.5 inches apart. Now, after making this bread recipe many times, I could tell you that one of the most important steps that we need to do is to flatten each ball. This may seem wrong, but trust me on this one and just trust the process. You must flatten each ball until you see a disc that is almost 1 inch tall. And while that may seem like it's way too much, it is not. Right after you flatten your ball, it will shrink back a little bit. Also, if we skip this step, what we will get is basically burger bread balls, not buns. After we finish, we need to cover the buns. I like to use plastic wrap and then put my tray in the oven to rise. You need to let the buns rise for an hour or until they have doubled in size. You can also rise the dough overnight in your fridge, but if you do this, you need to make sure that you cover the tray well. And then before you bake them, you need to take them out of the fridge for at least 30 minutes so they can sit at room temperature before baking. You're gonna preheat your oven to 375, and then we're gonna make an egg wash for the bread. Then after your bread has doubled in size, we're going to brush each ball with this egg wash. You need to make sure that you cover like the whole ball, especially the sides and the bottom, because this will grow, and if not, only the top will be shiny. I kept my buns simple and I didn't put any toppings, but you could definitely add some sesame seeds if you like, which is the most common topping. But you could add many more things to add flavor to this. You could add caramelized onions, or you could add herbs or even cheese. Then we're going to bake this for 20 minutes, but after 12 minutes, you want to rotate your tray to ensure an even browning. And this is how they will look. On the side, you're gonna see an image of a grilled chicken sandwich that I made using this burger bun. And there you can see that the bread is not too small nor too big. Now look at the difference on how the buns look if they are divided into 8 pieces. The buns that are divided into 10 rolls are as big as the palm of my hand. And you can see here that the ones that are divided into 8 pieces are way bigger than the palm of my hand. The size, it is all up to you. It doesn't matter the size, they will still be very soft and very fluffy. If you want, you could brush them with a little butter on the top, and trust me, they are so good that you could eat them by themselves. I will leave you the recipe link in the description below for the bread and also for the chicken breast, just in case you want to make my grilled chicken sandwich, which was made with this potato bread. Thanks for watching and buen provecho. See you on the next video.